Olia, you're a professor for new media, you're a web artist, a web archaeologist, an expert in the history of digital culture. And I wanted to talk to you about the wave of artistic projects that we see at the moment that are concerned with printing out the internet in one form or another. I thought we would start our conversation with a very particular example, a book, a novel even, called Working on My Novel by Cory Archangel. You gave it to me recently on the hallway and said you wanted to lend it to me because you really liked it. My first question would be why you gave it to me.
I gave it to you, first of all, because I know that you're writing novels. And then I look at this book, and I think it can be so important for anybody who is writing the novel to see the process, modern process of writing the novel, how it happened to others. Book is also, of course, what is great about it, that it is a novel itself. It's a novel about people who write the novels, and it is at the same time it's about the internet and being online, and also thinking about the situation of being online, and maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe I have to write a novel now, or can I be online and at the same time write the book? Or is it enough just to announce that I'm writing the novel? Is writing the novel more important than tweeting?
Or the other way around, is tweeting about it more important than writing it? Maybe we should just briefly describe the book, first of all. You describe it a little bit, and maybe the project. I mean, it was before it was a book, before it was published by Penguin Press, no less, a famous publisher of many classic novels. It was a project on the web, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Cory Archangel's Twitter, and he was retweeting every time he would see the tweet about somebody working on his or her novel. So first it was like his Twitter channel. And this is already an interesting thing. There is such a term that was introduced by Nicholas Carr, the author of the book The Big Switch. The book itself is about the cloud computing, about rise of the cloud and how things are happening there. And when he talks about journalism and publishing online, he notices that there is a very significant thing that happens, and it is a big unbundling, that things are in fact becoming smaller and more disconnected, more discrete. There is not a book but separate chapters, or not a magazine but article by this journalist and
not an album but individual songs by
exactly.
iTunes.
This is on one hand it is a commercial model, on another it's of course affects very much the content and how things appear. And already this I think this Twitter channel or Twitter collection by Cory was going in the opposite direction, to make the bundle, to collect things that are disconnected, to find them all and to show them all together. And I think for many other projects that we know today that has to do with printing the web out, one of the biggest motivation is not to put something digital on analog medium, to put something what was on screen on paper, but exactly to make this act to collect things, them again together, hold them together.
That was exactly one of the things that when I looked at it or when I read the book, I'm not sure if I can really call it reading, but when I read it, when I paged through it, that bundling again of disparate tweets is exactly one of the things that irritated me. As a user of Twitter, I'm used to having very disparate tweets about all kinds of different subjects, curated by myself, my own interests, by the people I follow. And as with all internet experiences, you're used to this kind of melange of very different things. And to have all these tweets collected together that are disparate, they're made by different people at different times, was definitely irritating to me at first. Can you understand that people would be irritated by this book?
You mean you were irritated as a reader or as a novel writer?
Both. As a reader of internet tweets, because I was missing the context of other tweets. I think if I had followed his Twitter feed, like I follow your Twitter feed, and you publish the quotes from the sites that you're unearthing, I find that very, interesting, amusing, gives me food for thought, whatever, and then I scroll on. That's the way I encounter it. But to be stuck with these Twitters on these individual pages, and he paints them, kind of emblematically or dramatically, like aphorisms or so, like poems maybe, one tweet on one page. I didn't really know what to do with it at first. I thought, and I see this reflected in other reviewers who are more from the literary side than from the internet side, is it a joke? And if so, on whom? Is it art project that is just not really meant to be read, but more kind of consumed as an idea, as a gesture? So I was definitely, it took me a while to kind of get over my initial irritation.
I think it is, of course, a gesture. It's minimalistic and conceptually, I would say it's conceptually very strong work. For me, it was more that on each page I was happy for these writers because they were published by Penguin Press, which maybe would never
have happened
to them. I know what you are talking about when you say that the tweets are now taken out from their own context. They look more dramatic or more pathetic or more funny when they initially were. It's against the Twitter logic. The logic of the Twitter is that things should fade in time, and they are all the time mixed with something else. And you mentioned my quotes that I tweet. These are the people who are not writing their novel. These are the people who are making their web page. And they also sort of, let's say, they fail. They promised that they will do it, but they never came back to this page. That's why I have it. Things are 20 or 15 years old. When I started this project, I thought that my Twitter should be only the channel for these old pages. But then Twitter was, so to say, more strong as a channel, as my intention. And I started to mix it together with my events in my personal life, retweeting other people. So all this is mixed together. And some people maybe understand what I'm quoting, some think that this is something funny from contemporary web page. So there is this moment of uncertainty, and also maybe this idea that it's not so important. And as soon as you make things out of there, they get more meaning, or maybe change their meaning dramatically. And in this case, the tweet not just put on the page, but put on each tweet has its own page. Something what makes it maybe too prominent for the tweet. But as far as I remember, the big thing Cory made, he contacted every novelist and asked for the permission. So it is people agreed to appear in this form.
Probably one of the ironies is they can all point to a Penguin book and saying, "Here, I'm a published author."
At the time we deal with this opposition, or with this question, how much you would spend on reading online. That people on the web, they wouldn't read something that was more than 30 seconds. Next year it would be only 15 seconds, and it's not like this with the books. There was another review of the book in New Yorker, where the journalist says that I didn't even have to sit down to read this book.
Yeah, I noted this also. He says, The first thing to be said about it in this sense is that it's remarkably short. Here's how short it is. I finished it not in one sitting, but in one standing. I signed for the delivery, opened the package, then read the book from cover to cover right there in the hallway in a readerly attitude of casual triumphalism. I had spent so little time away from my desk that when I finished the book, I barely needed to refresh my Twitter timeline.
I think very nice observation. Yeah. I think now that indeed there is a chance for this book to occupy you for much longer time, because there are links, there are the names of each author there, and you can go and check what's happening there on their Twitter. I didn't try it myself, but I can imagine that if you start to make it, you will be immersed in the real hyper novel universe. So this working on my novel book can become a gate to the piece of hyper literature.
I think one of the fascinating properties of the internet is you have this boundless space, and here you have this closed space, the novel, the book. It ends, it begins, and it's a very different thing. So to put the tweets in this context, for me, loses, like I said, loses an environment that gives these tweets a lot of meaning.
But what you address now, how to preserve, rescue the context, which was not, of course, for this book, it was not the point, but for a lot of other projects, we know how to save data, how to grasp data, but this data without the right context, without everything what was around it, it's meaningless and it has zero value. And at the same time, all this doesn't exist in form of a web page that you can just download. The services like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, they are all designed in a way that they don't let you to save.
To say, this is it now, and now it's saved.
And there is now a big effort made to create crawlers that when it is about art project, that if there is for example, performance on Instagram, and how to archive it, how to preserve it, how to be able to show it somewhere else, maybe even offline, you would need all the Instagram to be downloaded, that the project makes sense. But it's of course it wouldn't be possible. But also just one image is also, or 10 images is also not enough to find out the right scale of what's to be cached, and also to find the technologies that would be able to make it. This is something what keeps people who translate digital into physical, and to preserve today's for the future. It keeps busy.
But that's usually not the aspect that's spent a lot of time on, at least in the popular reception. That's usually kind of mentioned in one sentence, and then he had to build a lot of software or something. It's usually focuses on size. For example, we have, two, there may be more even, current projects of trying to print out Wikipedia in different ways. There's the one project by Michael Mandiberg, he's called, who did what you just explained, that he tried to capture a specific moment in Wikipedia without getting all the new additions mixed in. That was one difficult part of his project. So from this quote-unquote screenshot, he uploaded that now on the print-on-demand site, where now supposedly it could be printed. You could order volume 500 of 7,000, and then it's printed out, and then you can buy it for $80 or something. And the whole project, if it were to be printed out, is some 7,000 volumes. So anyway, there's another Wikipedia printout project in England, 1,000-volume print edition, which is also 10-meter-long bookcase, and then 1,000 volumes and so on. So these projects definitely have a strong issue with size, I would say, to make visible, thousands of volumes, which I find is I'm not sure if that's really the most interesting thing about Wikipedia, is that it's big.
What it makes me think about the motivations. With the students in the Digital Culture Colloquium, we start semester always with reading Varney Bush's famous article as we may think. This is the article that influenced the development of personal computer, hypertext, also how hardware should look in the contemporary digital culture. It was written in 1945.
In 45?
Yeah, in 1945. And there one of the famous quotes in this text is when Vannevar Bush is getting really visionary and like thinks about things that completely not possible now, but once it will be like this, he says all Encyclopedia Britannica can fit into a matchbox. So this is in fact we are now finally live in the world where many encyclopedias, not only Encyclopedia Britannica, can fit in half of on one match in a matchbox, and then it comes to the projects like this that but let's try to understand how much of paper was it, how much of the volumes that fit on matchbox.
I think there's definitely a sense of having to give measuring sticks. You often see a picture of the artist standing in front of Wikipedia pages, or similar image, maybe a bit different, of Kenneth Kenneth Goldsmith, lying like Dagobert Duck in this wealth of printed paper that was sent to him when he wanted to print out the internet. So you have always the attempt to find a currency or a measure that makes the scale graspable. When students in Düsseldorf printed out the JSTOR articles, you always have these figures. 250,000 pages. It always has to be a figure with lots of zeros behind it to be impressive.
And these are always also pages.
Pages.
These are not videotapes. These are not diskettes.
Right.
These are not
pages,
stones.
volumes. I mean, that to me is kind of an image of that we're still at the baby phase of trying to grasp the internet, is that we're trying to latch on this one aspect. Oh, it's so big, it's so big. I'm not sure if size and paper size is really
telling us anything.
An interesting translation.
But what is really telling, in my opinion, is that it always comes back to paper. And this is somewhat the tragedy of the digital culture and also of their interfaces and the network. And by the way, we're now talking about the artistic project, monumental things to print out Wikipedia, but it was already for many years on the Wikipedia itself that you can make books out of the article. So there is a service, you collect article on this, on that, on whatever, you make your collection, and then it will be printed for you. And then it's so they had a layout, they would make footnotes in the academic style, not in the Wikipedia style. And then it immediately had completely different appearance. It's the same text. It's very often, again, it's maybe not information you can trust, but as soon as it's printed, it's supposed to be more valuable, a trustable source to quote. And with students, we printed out some things just to compare layouts. And this was for Wikipedia at that time. It was the experiment to give more power to these articles.
More credence, or they seemed more believable.
And this paper, to make it like on paper, it was there from the very beginning, and it's not letting us go in Xerox PARC, where the personal computers were conceptualized. There was a term they used for the interface. Actually, they called it magic paper. So because it had to be like paper. Paper never vanished. I would say with the years it becomes more and more prominent, and also the challenge to design for the web or for the apps, for small screens, for big screens, as if it is paper. It is not disappearing. And there are moments in the history then it's getting extremely strong.
On the one hand, it's sehr naheliegend to think about paper, because we were used to read information on paper and not have it sung to us or have it looked at as a film or a movie. So I think it's easy to understand, but I also think it really do credit to either books or the internet.
There is another project I wanted to bring attention. This is a project of our former student, Sebastian Schmiegs. It is called Network Optimization. It's visually, it is similar to working on my novel, because most of the pages in these books are, so to say, empty, and only sometimes you see some quote. He printed out the real books from the online books, and here all the text except highlighted quotes is white on white, so you don't see everything. Only see the stuff that many users highlighted while they were reading it. Many people read these books in it's a Kindle edition, and there you if you have access to this database, you understand what people really took out, what they wanted, what to remember. So it was filtered by wisdom of the crowd, how they call it.
Is it one book or is it many books?
The series consists of the 7 habits of active people, the 5 love languages, and how to win friends and influence people. So these are obviously books that
kind of
somebody reads and want to
optimize.
Yeah, it also explains something here in this case, how differently books can function than they are digital and networked. Also, Sebastian made something else. This is a project which is called 56 Broken Kindle Screens. It is a book, but each page is where you collected different glitches or what went wrong when you read the book.
I hope it weren't all his own Kindles.
No, he was collecting it. Yeah. But such things, I think they're important to remember how books looked at a certain moment in the history, like in our times. I think I don't know if it exists as a book or it's just a collection somewhere. Somebody collected the pages from Google Books where you can see the hands.
The hands.
And people.
Paul Soulellis, when we were at his talk recently, when he was giving here a Wahlwoche and then afterwards had a talk at the Stadtbibliothek, also mentioned the book, which I thought was a very interesting way to make visible, or the Google books are actually scanned by real people, mostly black people. You see it on their hands, who have to press down these old manuscripts hours and days. I think these are very interesting projects. So where do you think the printed web has a moment now and is a kind of a trend, maybe a thing now? Do you think we will go on printing out the web, or what will be the future ways to give it a form in which to experience it in other media?
There are these 2 things that I enjoy moment about printing the web. One is this drive to bundle things. I find this skill shouldn't disappear. Just intention to bring things together is something what one should develop to resist the great unbundling. Another, because this process now is very intensive to print things out, to see them on the page, I hope that maybe it will be finally the climax, the end of affiliation with the page, and there will be finally interfaces and applications and a way developers think about their products that they develop for screens. They will go away from the page metaphor.
Yeah. Well, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.